Welcome back to week 46. How was your week? Did you notice anything? Here's what's happening this week. Rejection. And there's that cliche, rejection is God's protection. And remember that part of that is being different. So kind of maybe wearing glasses that are a little bit, funkadoodle, for example. So let's take a look at this week's fable and see what rejection has in store for us. The name of this fable is Ivory Tower, and it was actually written by my late mother in 1958. And I know I said to you, oh, these are channeled. However, there are 3 fables in this deck, in this book, that were actually, I was called to go to this box of her old writing and pull it out. And so in this, I pulled this out and something said, look at it. And it had no title. It literally was just the fable itself. And the interesting thing about this little bit of backstory is the idea that, when we were working on this book, my editor said, the fable, it's too long. Why don't we just cut it down? I said, nope, can't take a word out of it. So literally there is, in this fable, there has been nothing changed. And in fact, other than a few like little tweaks that had to be changed just for understanding in the other fables, you're going to find that they are all the original channeled, just kind of what came to me, the ones that I was told to write down. With rejection, this week's focus becomes they won't use me. And in this fable, so I'm going to share with you, this is the final poem of the 3 that you'll find in this book by my late mother. She made these observations in 1958, using a gay artist as a metaphor for the person who doesn't conform. This week, we consider the cost of being an individual. What a wonderful thing, if you think about it, the cost of being an individual. And what does that mean? That means wearing funky glasses that when other people go, those are hideous. Sometimes when I'm out with friends, I'll say, sweet or beat, what do you think? And, friends will often say, you can rock that. And other people go, So the point is that when you think of 1958 and the year was the year that before I was born, a bit before, my mother wrote this fable about this artist who knew he would be called to jury duty, but they took one look at him being a gay artist and he knew they wouldn't use him, but he showed up anyway each time. And what was that about? Well, it tells us a couple things. It tells us that we're willing to show up and play the game. In other words, I'm willing to be a part of the society you're calling society, but I know you won't include me. And I think that's something that we have been working with and dealing with for generations. I don't think that changes. I think the players change and maybe the skin color changes or the ethnicity changes. But at the end of the day, there's always that thing of like, I know I'm not going to be included with that group. And I think that what this is telling us is that when we look at this, he's a very talented artist. But the question is, and when people see this fable, the first thing they think is, oh, it's rejection and it's bad. And I often say, who's doing the rejecting? I can't tell you how many people have said to me, my marriage ended, or a divorce, and I was shattered. And one friend of mine in particular had gone through a horrible divorce, and the person he was married to was having an affair with a family member. It can go on and on. The point I'm making is that at the end of the day, when my friend was shattered by this, and, in his words, for years, I was rejected. And I remember saying to him one day, are you sure you were rejected and you didn't do the rejecting? And he was like, what? And I said, well, you'd never leave her. Like, you would have never left that marriage. And he said, well, that's true. And I said, but can you imagine today not being with your current wife and your son? And so when we look at that as an overarching idea, of course he couldn't imagine that. But if it hadn't been for the rejection that he perceived was rejection saving him, he would never have the life he has now. So sometimes when we look at rejection, we have to look at sometimes perhaps he was withholding from that relationship long before she had the affair or wanted to leave. And when we look at it that way, he was like, yeah, I think you're right. I didn't know how to be in that relationship, and it wasn't the right relationship for me. So I want to just underline for you that sometimes, and I call it when I have people working for me or with me, and, you know, I call it an exit attitude, that they kind of take on 3 months before they're ready to leave. And so we do that in various situations. We have that inner part of us that starts rejecting the situation. And then we can legitimately be an upset that the other person fired us and go, wow, I can't believe what an awful person. When the truth is, we weren't really doing what we were there to do anyway, because we didn't want to be there. But we didn't have the courage to say, you know what, I don't want to be here. And I think that, again, second fable, second week, we're looking at emotional issues, right? Because second chakra in the seventh chakra becomes, what is a universal emotional idea? Well, of course, rejection is. And so when we look at it that way, that we're not really being rejected. We may have wanted out of something for a long time, but rejection allows us to stay where we are without having to change or really look at ourselves. Because the truth is, a lot of us feel, there are many, let me put it this way, many people out there feel that somebody did this to them, and they carry that and repeat that pattern. So that's what we're looking at with rejection. Here's your opportunity to say, if I was rejected by someone, how did I start it? It's kind of like the chicken or the egg, right? So where did you start rejecting the circumstance so that you got to be bigger than it? So let me put it this way to you. When you were little, if you were constantly rejected or ignored, you get older and you create the same circumstance over and over so you can heal it. Can we declare the idea of rejection complete, and so much saying that we both are rejecting where we're at? The boss is saying, I don't want to work with somebody that isn't here. And you're saying, I don't really want to be here. Let's clear the space so somebody can be here and I can go on to a better job. And those are things that are really the consciousness that we're looking to take on. So let's take a look at this. And let's look at Torys' tip. I wonder what she has to say. This story has two powerful opposing interpretations. I just said that. One is about society's rejection of the artist for not conforming. The other is about self-imposed exile and the artist's need to protect his identity and not give up who he is. In fact, both artists and society are rejecting of each other. Through the fable, we discover the importance of protecting our personal gifts. And I think I'm very curious to hear what you think of this fable and how it hits you. And I also want to offer you this opportunity to look at this as a snippet in time. Take this fable and remember that it was written in 1958. And when you look at it that way, you will begin to see that there's really no new issue. There's new opportunities for us to respond to things with ability. So that is the key to me with this particular fable. And again, in the first impressions, I go into the idea that, we look at this as being rejected. And he says that the artist says that the court won't use him. But in fact, he's never really rejected, because he's actually invited. And he continually does his part. So if you think about it that way, he shows up. But you see, he knows that society is not ready to accept him yet. So what he knows is what's true to him, which is the world he lives in. And in this case, it's art, but it can be any world he lives in. But he doesn't need to be defined by the rejection of society. And that's a very important, I think that's a very big thing to look at. And it becomes extremely difficult to work through. Let's see. This is very interesting. I think although he's highly aware of the limitations of others, the artist continues to show up year after year because, as he states at the end of the fable, he hopes that his contribution opens the conversation of new thought around old ideas. Wow. You know, thinking about it wasn't so different back then. It's just that we didn't have the tools we have now to approach certain things. And the thing is, we have the tools, but oftentimes people don't really use them. The thing that you really want to look at in this is the idea of love and tolerance for those who are different than you. Even if you feel that you have been persecuted by like in this case, he's a gay man being persecuted by society. No matter what your position is, if you feel you have been in some way persecuted by society or by circumstances, one of the things that we want to look at here is we say, do I really want to be a part of that anyway? Because what happens is suddenly, if I'm a part of that, do I lose who I am if I conform? So there's a lot of little nuances in this particular fable. This week, set your intention, this is the intention of the week, to become aware of where you feel slighted in your life, and open yourself to the love and tolerance open yourself to love and tolerance of those who are different than you. And that also goes back to, are you judging people who are different than you because you perceive they're judging you? Very important, because there is a cycle, and if you keep playing the game, you keep playing hoping that the other side will see it, and that's the ultimate of this. So one of the things I want to say to you is that this is about personal labels. This is about how you've made meaning of who you are in your life. So I really encourage you to really look at the solo exercise here. And the other thing is that this is going to reflect how you function emotionally in the world when you perceive not being part of it, or you perceive yourself as being part of it. So it's very important to get that we all play both roles. See, it's easy to say I'm persecuted by so-and-so, but then the other person says, well, wait a minute, you're persecuting me. Oftentimes what happens, and again, I'm not trying to be specific about any particular thing, but if you look at it as, I don't know about you, but I've often noticed that when I accuse people of things, I can look right in the mirror and see it happening because I'm doing the same thing. You know, we can only spot it if we've got it. So if you're saying, oh, that person's doing that, well, how do you know? How do you know? How do you know unless you know it intimately? Unless you have done it. You have tried to do it. It has been done to you and you've done it. You know, it's the cliche of hurt people hurt people. And that is where we look here to break the cycle, to look at the labels we've given ourselves and giving up some of those labels. And it may not be the route you think it is. That's very important. Okay, so, you know, there's another piece here that is really about giving up who you think you need to be in the world, or who others may need you to be true to you, and not doing it at someone. You're not saying, well, I need to be true to me. It's more like, you know, I'm going to give you an example here of a very dear friend of mine, beautiful, beautiful girl. I remember years ago, she came to me and she said, we worked together a little bit, and she came to my old studio and she said, I said, how are you doing? She said, oh, good. You know, my husband and I are divorcing. And I'm like, what? You know, what happened? Because they were very nice people. And I was like, oh, what happened? Like, you know, the perfect couple. And she said, well, you know, I came downstairs the other day and I realized, and I said to him, you know, you're great and I'm great, but we don't have fantastic. And I think we really deserve fantastic. And he agreed with her. And it wasn't painful for them. I would have been like on the floor. But the point is, and you know, they were very much in the, I'm not rejecting you, you're not rejecting me. It's really like, this is life. This is not the dress rehearsal. This is the real thing. And we deserve, because we're both such great people, we deserve like beyond great. We deserve something that's so exciting for us. And he agreed. And I would say it was about a year later that they both had found other people, and, you know, they went on to have great, fantastic adventure. He found someone who wanted to travel the world with him, and he loved that. And she found someone that was in her field, and they got to really work together, and she loved it. So what I'm saying to you is that sometimes we can call something and say, that's not right, you know, call out on it. And it doesn't have to be done with anger. It doesn't have to be you're right and I'm wrong, or I'm wrong and you're right, or whatever, you're whatever. I get all that confused. But it can be a situation where we together are rejecting circumstances that are not the rules in which we want to play. See, we can actually say as a community, as a world, I don't want to play that game. And what would happen if we no longer did that? I'll leave you with that thought. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about a fable that was written in 1958 and how you feel it applies to your life today. Remember, with the meditation, sometimes all you do is read it and you take in what it says and contemplate it. Don't make it harder on yourself than you need to. Don't reject yourself. I will see you all next week. I hope you have a very enlightening and energized week.